what Dr. Google tells us about Robert. He is brilliant. He was known as the father of atomic bomb. He was part of the Manhattan Project that created the bomb, and the bomb was applied to the two islands in Japan. So he was brilliant. He had good education. He was a professor. So, what's his family upbringing like? Let's scroll down. Apparently, he was from the upper class Jewish family. He had good education. He enrolled in good schools. And even if you scroll down, when he was sick, his family, his father, sent him somewhere. And because of that, he was able to recover. He had tutor. He had opportunity to learn horseback riding. So he was from the upper class. And apparently, when he was in grad school at Harvard, I think he had mental health issues. If you read further, he nearly stabbed one of his friends or classmates. Not stabbed, strangled, sorry. So he had mental health issues. But the way the university pursued this incident, it seems that according to a book written by Malcolm Gladwell, if you scroll all the way down, his parents intervened because they are from the upper class. Maybe they were somewhat educated. Maybe they knew how the system worked. It seems, according to this book written about him, is somewhere down there by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called Outliers. His parents intervened. So because of that, he did not get into trouble. Maybe he got a warning because of his medical reasons. He still got his PhD and he made contributions to the sciences by developing the atomic bomb, by involving in the Manhattan Project. Are we clear? Okay. Let's Google another guy. Okay. Let's Google Chris Langan. If you have a gadget, if not, we can just look. I'm recording this right now. So, Chris, if you scroll down, I think he was from the working class family. And despite his family background, I think he had a stepfather. So, Robert had a better family upbringing than Chris. It's a no-brainer. Chris was brilliant. He skipped grades. And he went to Reed College and later Montana State. He did not finish due to things beyond his control. He had to work throughout college. And in the book written about him by Malcolm Gladwell, somewhere down there, it seems that he had to work throughout high school and college. And according to Malcolm Gladwell's book, according to this book, he had to drop out eventually because college was a different time in his days compared to your days. In your days, if you tell your academic advisor, your professor, I cannot take this session, I have to work, they will advise you, they will tell you to take another session of the same class or a different class to help you graduate in time. But this was a different time period. According to this book, his advisor wasn't very understanding. Maybe during his time, college was meant for kids from the upper middle or upper class. And very few students from his background maybe went to college in those days. So because of that, he had to drop out. And despite of that, he continued to learn. And he worked several jobs. He worked for Disney, for a technology company, and He developed a cognitive theoretical model despite not having a college degree. Chris was brilliant. So, why do I talk about these two guys? Am I crazy? Or are we on to a new topic? Okay, we are on to a new topic. We are a bit ahead, but it's okay because school is closing down. So, I don't know what chapter is that on your ebook. We are on to social stratification. And anybody know the meaning of social stratification? It's very related, but it still means different between social inequality and social stratification. And these two guys right here, you can Google him again when you get home. So this is what we mean by social stratification. It's a system in place in any society, regardless of the social, economic, and political system. It is a system in any society that ranks or categorizes people into hierarchies. This is what we mean by social stratification. Are we clear? So, Chris and Robert are being categorized by the American society, given their political, economic context, into two different hierarchies. We also call these hierarchies social classes, right? In any society that has unequal distribution of income, wealth, assets, educational opportunity, healthcare access, this is going to create a division. This division is what we call social stratification. Are we clear? Okay. People can be stratified in any society by either their ascribed status or achieved status. We know, you learned this before. Ascribed statuses are one's race, one's sex. Some societies are more patriarchal than others, and in some societies, people are classified, are ranked based on their sex or gender into different hierarchies. And because of that, they have different access to education, occupation, and other opportunities, as well as healthcare access, right? If they are ranked according to ascribed statuses or even birthrights. These are all examples of ascribed statuses. Are we clear? And people can also be ranked based on their achieved statuses. Achieved statuses, we've been through this, tends to be more voluntary. We have more control over our achieved statuses. We can decide as a family or within ourselves how much education we want to pursue. We have more control over these factors: family position, inheritance, in some places, our race and sex. We can decide what occupation we want to pursue, what major we want to pursue in college. These are all examples of achieved statuses. They are earned. It's based on hard work and effort. Okay, so before the capitalist system, there's another system in place which is called a feudalistic system. These are the hierarchies within the feudal system. And usually, is based more on ascribed statuses. As you can see, if you are born in a given rank, you die in that rank. There's hardly any social mobility in a feudalistic system. And the caste system is another stratification system based on ascribed statuses. And these are the different castes in India or Bangladesh, Pakistan. Even though I heard the caste system in all these South Asian countries, they work differently. But here are the main castes and the members who belong to each caste. And there is hardly any social mobility from one caste to another. It's not very different from the feudalistic system. Okay. So, I think all ancient societies have some sort of stratification system. Stratification is not a new thing, we all know that. And we can say that stratification, the concept itself, is an ideology that justifies inequality in any society. And inequality can be justified not only through these mechanisms, like the feudal system, or in this manner, like a caste system. Ideologies that justify all kinds of inequality can also be justified based on one's religion, wealth statuses, whether you are rich or poor, criminal backgrounds, or whether the country, the region is at war or not. And inequality can also be justified by one's ancestry or family social positions. And in the US, during the days of the Jim Crow law in the South, inequalities are justified based on the Jim Crow law, right? Based on race. So here are the many ways where ideologies have been created to justify inequality in any society. People can become slaves. So the slavery system is also a stratification system based on ascribed status. It's very hard, almost impossible, to move from being a slave to a free individual, right? And when countries are at war, sometimes countries are at war due to religious reasons, and the party that loses the war becomes the slave to the winning party. So sometimes inequality can be justified. Slave or free person, slave or wealth owner by religion. If a person is too poor to pay his debt or to fulfill his or her daily needs, sometimes the person, we see that in many societies, they sell or they sold their family members as slaves to wealthy families. It happened in many Asian societies. It happens in the West as well. People become slaves themselves or they sold their family members to pay off their debt. People become slaves sometimes through crime or because of war and because of ancestry. So these are all stratification based on ascribed statuses. Questions so far? Okay, this is the Jim Crow law. It's another stratification based on ascribed statuses. And in this case, the ascribed status that justify this ideology of inequality would be a person's racial group. Are we clear? Okay. So, stratification is not a new thing. We've been through this. It existed in ancient societies in Europe, the feudal system. in India and in China. The caste system. I will show you either through my video lecture or in another in-class lecture how the caste system works in China. It's in between a caste and a class system, in my humble opinion. And you'll see why next week if we have time. Or I will do a video lecture. So, these are all ideologies that justify inequality. And it existed centuries ago. And usually, the measures of wealth are used as a means to categorize people or to rank people into different hierarchies in different society. And the measures of wealth change over time. Back in those days, maybe in feudalistic society, the measure of wealth would be land. If you own land, maybe you are from a higher caste or higher class. Then the measures of wealth, even to this day, can be crops. And later on, after industrialization and urbanization, the measures of wealth becomes more diversified to determine a person's hierarchy in any society. Now, the measures of wealth also includes owning factories, owning buildings, owning other assets in the factories, owning shops, owning businesses. And the measures of wealth, as we progress through time, also includes owning all kinds of real estate, assets and capitals. And in today's society, the measures of wealth can also include owning stocks, bonds, cash, bitcoins, cryptocurrencies, or owning data. Do you know sometimes data to certain companies can be more profitable than whatever products or services they are selling? Do you know that? It's everywhere on the social media, on the news. Sometimes businesses, maybe through certain loopholes, or if that domain is not illegal yet, they treat their data, do you know that, is more profitable than whatever product or goods they are selling. So, the measures of wealth changes and has been more and more diversified over time. So, this means that stratification is not a new thing. We saw many examples. Questions so far? Okay. Your book also talks about the difference between a class and a caste. This looks like a very good essay question. Your essay is open book or open notes, but you cannot just copy and paste and submit that to me. You need to try to understand your essay in your final, the essay question, and you try to write that in your own words. And I plan to do that in such a way that one question is no more than 500 words. Is that too much for you? I think I plan to have 3 or 4 questions in your final, open notes, open book. But you are not allowed to copy and paste. It's too easy if you do it that way. You'll get a 0. Are we clear? So,
you're saying our final test is like an essay?
Yeah, it's how you do your essay, your previous essay on the movie. You download that from Canvas, you submit that back to me.
Okay.
It's the same way. Because I don't know how things are going to progress, and I don't know the place you live, whether you have access to a testing center, right? So I thought about this. That's the best I can do. Unless you have better suggestion. That works.
That works.
Okay. Anybody second? Whatever. So, according to a caste system, a person's position in the caste is solely determined by birth. If you are born in a given caste, like this or like this, you die in that caste, it's hard to move from caste to caste. According to a caste system, a person's position in society is solely determined by birth, determined at birth. Too bad for that dude or that lady. It's rigid. It's based on ascribed statuses. And in a class system, a person's social position is determined at birth. Look at Robert's biography and Chris' biography. Even though now we can see that Chris is doing quite well. Maybe if Robert would still be alive today, I think their social positions would be almost the same. Can we say that? Chris, despite not having college degree, he was able to carve a future for himself based on hard work and ingenuity. But initially, when they started off, according to Dr. Wikipedia, their early family life, it wasn't very equal. Or even their college life, it wasn't very equal, right? So, according to a class system, a person's social position is determined by birth and by achievement. Can we see that through the two biographies? Chris, despite not finishing college, can still carve a future for himself, can still have a good life. Not like what we see in the caste system in India or in the feudal system in Europe before capitalism came about. If they were from the feudal system or they were born in India, I don't think Chris would be a self-made man, my humble opinion. So this looks like a very good short essay question. Make sure you can explain the difference between caste and class in your own words. Are we clear? You definitely get this. Okay, so we've been through this before. Sometimes the quality of schools in different neighborhoods, in inner city, in high crime neighborhoods, in suburbs, in high class neighborhoods, their school system works differently. We all know, right? This can, over time, not right away, contributes to inequality in society at large. So, quality of schools in modern society can also be another mechanisms of stratification. So, as we can see, the means to rank people into different hierarchies become more diverse over time. Now, we also have access to data. Now, data is wealth and power. We all know that. Now, we also have the quality of schools. Kids who went to different schools, as confirmed by research, they turn out differently. We talk about this when we talk about socialization, remember? Okay, so economic restructuring that took place in the late 70s until the early 90s in many big cities in your country, where the manufacturing plants, maybe they figure it's cheaper to transfer their operations abroad to save on overhead costs, labor costs, and other relevant expenses. So when that happened from the 70s until the early 90s, Chicago, Detroit, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania encountered economic restructuring. So this can change people's hierarchy in any society. This can change the stratification system. Economic restructuring can change the nature of social stratification. And Even in this day, coronavirus, we don't know how long it's going to last in many countries. It's going to change the nature of stratification in many countries in the world. Let's talk about economic restructuring in the 70s first. So, those who had a stable job in the factories, they learned a skill through decades of working in the factory. Now, all of a sudden, maybe they lose their job because the factory closed down. It takes some time for them to learn another skill or trade. If within that short period of time, they don't have any transferable skills to other industry, they are going to experience a downward social mobility, a decline, maybe temporary or for a long time. Depends on the skills, whether they are transferable or not. They may experience a decline in their standards of living. So, social hierarchies or social positions can change because of economic restructuring. And recently, coronavirus can also change the nature of social stratification. Can you see that? Certain industries that people took for granted for a long time, like industry that produce gloves, face masks, sanitizers, they were just maybe doing okay or not much change in their profits or revenues. They were not under pressure to produce a whole lot more. But all of a sudden, all these products and services are in high demand now, right? If you go to Hy-Vee, you go to Family Market, you go to Apple Market, go to anywhere, I'm sure you notice some shelves are empty. I'm sure you realize that. So, this changes the nature of social stratification, even if it is for a short period of time. Manufacturers of gloves, protective equipments, masks, soaps, sanitizers, tissues, you name it. They may do quite well in this time. And occupations that involve face-to-face interaction. And if there's no replacement, not like teaching, waiter, waitress, retail, they may experience a big hit right now. And we don't know how long it's going to last. So sometimes a pandemic is a pandemic now. It used to be an epidemic. When it was an epidemic, the coronavirus, as we can see, it already changed the nature of stratification in many countries, regardless of their social, economic, and political system. Different industries, different sectors of employment in China are affected by this virus. And different industries in Singapore, in Taiwan, in the US. All these countries have different economic and political systems, right? They are affected. Restaurants are affected in a different way. Some restaurants used to do quite well before the virus. Now, maybe people cook more. They frequent the restaurants less. It affects the tips, the wages of employees, waiter and waitress and the cooks, and other personnel in the restaurants. And in retail, the same thing. Questions so far? Okay. Here are more definitions. Meritocracy. Personal effort or merit as a means of ranking people in a society. When we talk about meritocracy, it originates from the word merit. It means that ideally, we know it's not 100% the case. Ideally, meritocracy means that a person's social position in society should be ranked by the person's merit, hard work, effort, knowledge, skills. A person's position in society should be ranked by a person's merit as measured by hard work, effort, knowledge, and merit embodies the effort we put in to acquire education, to excel at work, and what else and what not. This is what we mean by meritocracy. And your book also talks about status consistency. And status consistency is high in the caste system, but it can be low in the class system, and we will discuss how is that so. Let's go to a caste system or feudal system. People from high caste have more wealth, more assets. So, status consistency is portrayed in a caste system. The pariahs, the sudras, they have very few wealth or no wealth at all. They are very poor. The same thing can be said for the feudal system. But if we compare the biographies of Chris and Robert, we see that status consistency is not very much portrayed in their biographies. Chris, despite not going to college, not finishing college, he has a high position in the US society. He's doing quite well. The same thing for Robert's family, I bet. And let's talk about a medical student. When the person was in medical school, the person was poor for sure, most of the time, unless the person has a rich parent, right? We all know. So, because of the person's credentials, the person made it to med school. The person may occupy a high position in society. Aside from wealth, sometimes knowledge, political power, charisma, other means can also be used to rank people in different societies. So, medical students, law students, they may be poor when they were in school, but they may occupy a somewhat high position in society. They are respected for their merit, their achievement. So, we don't see status consistency in this example, right? In the examples of med students or law students, there's status inconsistency in those examples. Are we clear? And social class is the grouping of people based on wealth, income, education, occupation, and so on. And social mobility means the ability for one to change his or her social positions. Economic restructuring in Detroit. We know many factory workers, despite not going to college, they were able to afford a mortgage in the 70s until the 90s. They were able to feed their families. The whole family might be able to live on one paycheck back then because of the skill they acquire as factory workers. Maybe they move up as supervisors, maybe as managers eventually. But after economic restructuring, some factory workers, they lost their jobs. They experienced a downward mobility. Their social position changed. The same thing can be said for some waiters and waitresses, some employees of retail chains in different parts of the world affected by the virus. And in employees of factories producing masks, producing soap, producing tissues. If they are under pressure to go to work, they have to work overtime to meet all these demands in this time. If they are being paid more, if they are being paid overtime, these factory workers may experience a temporary upward mobility, right? This is what we mean by social mobility. And there are two kinds of mobility. We have the intergenerational mobility. This is a kind of movement across social positions, across generations. If you look at the biography of Chris and Robert, we see intergenerational mobility being manifested in the two biographies, right? Robert, he was born into a rich Jewish family. He had good education. His parents had wealth, and because of that, he had good education. They could afford good prep school, and they could send him to Harvard. This is a manifestation of intergenerational mobility. Are we clear? And Chris, despite not going to college, he is a self-made man. Maybe he is able to provide a good future for his kids, for his subsequent generations. Maybe because of that, because of Chris' hard work, his children or grandchildren, we don't know, are able to move out of the social ladder. This is another manifestation of intergenerational mobility. Questions so far, are we clear? And your book also talks about intragenerational mobility. It means differences in social mobility among different members of the same family or the same extended family. In the same family, siblings may have different innate motivations. Siblings may have innate personalities, and they pursue different majors. They turn out differently. Some are better off than others. This is what we mean by intragenerational mobility. We see that quite a bit in the news, among people around us, right? We see these two quite a bit. Inter and intragenerational mobility. Let's say an athlete, if he works hard, he make pro, he play his card correctly, he or she plays their cards correctly, and he or she, after retire from the profession, was able to save enough money, invest in all kinds of franchise and business and whatnot, diversify their wealth. And maybe their siblings, they work hard too, but they pursue a different profession. So maybe they turn out differently than those athletes. This is another manifestation of intragenerational mobility. Are we clear? We see that quite a bit from athletes' family, MO. And sometimes some athletes, they have good heart. They help members of their family, members who are not doing so well. Right, we see that all the time. And structural mobility is a change in a person's social class due to structural change. This is what we mean by structural mobility. Are we clear? Okay. Class traits. People from different social class have different behaviors. They behave differently. They have different traditions and customs. They do things differently. around festivities. And they have different norms. What they consider good, bad, or right. This is what we mean by norms, right? You just had your midterm. And they have different hobbies. And some are more able to take vacation than others. No brainer. They have different leisure activities. For instance, we've been through this before. Some sports are more costly than other sports. Some sports are more meant for the elites. Right, we've been through this before. Some sports are more universal, are more affordable. So, people from different social class have different recreation and leisure activities. This is what we mean by class traits. They have different tastes of wine and whatnot. So, because of that, sometimes it's not due to favoritism per se. When a prospective employee, when he or she interviews for certain jobs, sometimes there are sayings or even research that says that employers, they prefer to hire people from their own social class. Sometimes it's not because they play favoritism. Sometimes it's because they have similar class traits in terms of all these characteristics. So they can interact better with prospective employees when they were interviewing. So they instantaneously like that person and hire that person. But sometimes by going to college, regardless of where a person started from, a person's class traits can change by going to college. And these may equalize employment, hiring, or opportunities, regardless of where the person started off. Okay. This is what we mean by global stratification. We will talk more about global stratification next week. It's a comparison of wealth, economic stability, status, power among countries around the world. You compare the wealth based on GDPs, based on GNPs, sometimes we also compare the levels of inequality in different societies based on the famous Gini coefficients. Some countries are more unequal than others. And with coronavirus, the level of economic stability can change. Whether it's temporary or for the long term is still unsure. And this can change the nature of global stratification. And people also compare countries based on statuses of women through different indices and measures. Some countries have more say in the international arena than others. In the UN, in World Bank, in WHO. And there were no global stratification during hunter-gatherers' time. Everybody was equal. There were no hierarchies, no class or caste system during this time. And I think the notion of maybe there was some caste system between hunter-gatherers and Industrial Revolution. The feudal system came out. The caste system came out in different countries. And during Industrial Revolution, the class system replaced the caste system when capitalistic economic system replaced the traditional feudalistic economic or production system. And now the nature of global stratification changed again in post-industrial societies. So I'm going to stop here. Hang on, I'm going to give you back your test.